I always thought my life had finally slowed down. I told Emily that one night while we washed dishes together. "This feels right," I said. She smiled and said, "I like quiet too." I believed her. I'm Alex, and back then I thought love was supposed to be simple. I woke up early, made coffee, and waited for Emily to come out of the bedroom rubbing her eyes. "You're up again?" she'd ask. "Someone has to pay the bills," I joked. She laughed every time. At night we sat on the couch. "One day," she said, "maybe a small house." I nodded. "No fancy stuff," I said. "Just us." She leaned against me and whispered, "That sounds perfect." Sometimes she talked about her past. "Daniel texted about the kids," she'd say. I tried to sound calm. "Are they okay?" She nodded. "They miss me." I swallowed my jealousy and said, "You're a good mom." Inside, something tight pulled at my chest. Daniel was rich. Everyone knew that. Emily said it didn't matter. "That life is over," she told me. "I chose you." I held on to those words like proof. My best friend Mark wasn't convinced. Over beers he said, "Man, are you sure she's done with him?" I shrugged. "She's with me." Mark frowned. "Just don't ignore signs." I laughed it off. "You worry too much." Emily's friend Lisa worried me more. When Emily went to the bathroom, Lisa leaned close and said, "You're nice, Alex." I smiled. "Thanks." She didn't smile back. "Just, be careful." I asked, "Careful about what?" She shook her head. "Nothing." One night Emily went quiet. "You okay?" I asked. She said, "Just tired." Her phone buzzed. She turned it face down. "Work?" I asked. "Yeah," she said too fast. Later I held her hand. "We're good, right?" I asked. She squeezed my fingers. "Of course." I wanted to believe her. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I felt something thin and fragile between us. I told myself love meant trust. I told myself the past couldn't reach us here. I chose comfort over truth and I slept. But the next morning Mark called. "You coming to work?" he asked. I said, "In a minute." He paused. "You sound off." I replied, "I'm fine." He sighed. "That's what scares me." Emily walked in and asked, "Who was that?" I said, "Mark." She nodded and said, "He worries too much." I joked, "That's his job." She didn't laugh. At breakfast she said, "Daniel wants to take the kids this weekend." I said, "Okay." She watched me closely. "You sure?" I answered, "I trust you." Her eyes dropped to her plate. Before leaving she kissed my cheek. "Tonight?" she asked. I said, "I'll cook." She smiled softly. "You always do." The door closed behind her and the apartment felt too quiet. Mark's words echoed in my head. "Be careful." I shook it off and grabbed my keys. I told myself love needed patience. I told myself this life was real. I told myself nothing was about to break. I didn't know then how fragile comfort could be. I only knew I wanted to hold it longer. I walked out believing this was the beginning, not the end. And as I locked the door I whispered, "We're safe." I needed that lie. I carried it with me, smiling, pretending the ground under my feet wasn't already cracking. I had no idea this peace was borrowed, and that soon everything I trusted would ask for its price. I was still blind, still hopeful, still standing at the edge. I noticed the change before she said anything. Emily stopped leaving her phone on the table. One night I asked, "Why is it always face down now?" She said, "You're imagining things," and smiled without looking at me. Did I do something wrong? I asked later. She shook her head. "No, Alex. I'm just tired." Her answers got shorter. Our jokes faded. Silence filled the space. One night I heard her whispering in the kitchen. "I miss you too," she said softly. That voice wasn't for me. I stepped closer. "Emily?" I called. She jumped. "I was talking to the kids," she said. "They needed me." I nodded even though my stomach twisted. The next day I ran into him. I was leaving the grocery store when a black car stopped nearby. A man stepped out in a clean suit. Emily froze beside me. "Daniel," she said. He smiled at her, not at me. "Hey," he said calmly. "You look good." I held out my hand. "I'm Alex." He glanced at it, then at my shoes. "I know," he said, not shaking it. In the car Emily said nothing. I finally asked, "Does he hate me?" She sighed. "He's just confident." I laughed weakly. "That's one word for it." She didn't respond. That night I asked, "What does he want?" She sat on the edge of the bed. "He wants his family back." My chest tightened. I said, "And you?" She looked away. I don't know. I forced myself to speak. I trust you. She whispered, thank you, like it hurt. Mark called. You okay? He asked. I said, yeah. He said, that pause told me everything. I snapped, stop. He went quiet. I'm worried, he said. I hung up. Later Emily said, Daniel says he can give the kids everything. I asked, and what am I giving you? She replied, love. I said, is that enough? She didn't answer. I stared at my bank app that night. Numbers felt small. My future felt smaller. I asked myself, what do I really have? The answer scared me. Emily touched my arm. You're thinking too much, she said. I wanted to believe her. I said, we're okay. She nodded, but her eyes looked somewhere else. Lying awake, I counted breaths. I told myself doubt was weakness. I told myself love meant patience. Still, fear sat heavy in my chest. Something was cracking and I was pretending not to hear it. I went to work early. Mark met me by the door. You didn't sleep, he said. I replied, I'm fine. He said, you keep lying. I asked, what should I do? He said, ask her directly. That night I did. Are you choosing him? I asked Emily. She said, why would you ask that? I answered, because I feel replaced. She rubbed her face. It's complicated. I said, so is lying. She snapped, I'm not lying. I asked, then tell me everything. She whispered, I'm scared. Of what? I asked. She said, of losing my kids. I replied, and me? She hesitated. I don't know. That pause hurt more than words. I said, am I enough? She cried, this isn't about enough. I said, it always is. She stood up. I need air. I said, so do I. She left the room. I sat alone, shaking. I finally admitted the truth to myself. Love was slipping. I could feel it pulling away, and I was still holding on. I whispered, don't leave. No one answered. My phone stayed silent. I stared at the ceiling and said, I'm afraid. Saying it out loud made it real. The crack widened. I didn't fix it. I waited, hoping it wouldn't break. I told myself tomorrow would be clearer, but deep down I knew clarity was coming, and it wouldn't be kind to me. I stayed still, listening while the silence answered everything I feared. Emily sat across from me at the small kitchen table. She didn't touch her coffee. I said, why do you look like that? She took a breath and said, we need to talk. My hands went cold. I replied, okay. She said, I can't do this anymore. I asked, do what? She looked down. Us. The word hit hard. I said, what are you saying? She whispered, I have to choose what's best for the kids. I laughed once, sharp and weak. So this is about Daniel. She nodded. He can give them stability. I asked, and what about me? She said, you're not the problem. I snapped, that's worse. She continued, he has money, connections, space. The kids need that. I said, they need you. She replied, they need both parents. I said, then why did you choose me? She said, I thought I could. My chest felt tight. Do you love him? I asked. She shook her head. I love you. I said, that doesn't sound right. She added, but love isn't enough. Those words broke something inside me. I stared at the wall. So that's it? I asked. She said, I'm sorry. I wanted to beg. I wanted to scream. I said nothing. My silence scared me more than her words. She stood up. I didn't plan for this to hurt you. I laughed. You did. She flinched. Alex, please. I said, just go. She hesitated. I'll pack later. I replied, no. Now. She grabbed her coat. I never wanted to lose you, she said. I answered, you already did. She reached for my arm. I pulled away. Don't, I said. Her eyes filled. Goodbye. The door closed behind her. I sat there for a long time. The room felt hollow. I whispered, she chose him. Saying it made it real. I opened my phone and stared at nothing. Hours later I saw it. A photo online. Emily smiling beside Daniel. The kids between them. A perfect picture. A perfect lie. My hands shook. I dropped the phone. I slid down the wall and cried. Loud. Ugly. Alone. I said, why wasn't I enough? The room didn't answer. My chest hurt. My head spun. Mark called. I ignored it. He called again. I answered and said nothing. He said, talk to me. I whispered, she left. He swore softly. I'm coming over. I said, don't. He said, too late. When he arrived he said, I'm sorry. I laughed bitterly. She picked money. He replied, she picked fear. I asked, what's the difference? He had no answer. I said, I didn't beg. Mark said, good. I said, I wanted to. He said, I know. I stared at the floor. I feel empty. He said, that's shock. I asked, does it go away? He hesitated. It changes. I nodded slowly. She said she loved me. He said, she did. I snapped, then why did she leave? He said, because love isn't always brave. After he left, the silence came back. I lay on the couch and stared at the ceiling. I replayed every moment, every promise, every lie I believed. I opened my phone again. Another photo. Another smile. I turned it off. I'm done, I said aloud. My voice sounded small. I realized something then. The life I thought I had was gone. Not fading. Gone. And no amount of love could bring it back. I curled into myself and whispered, this is the end. My heart answered with pain. I didn't know what came next. I only knew I wasn't the same man anymore. Something inside me broke that night. Not loudly. Quietly. Permanently. I stopped answering my phone. Mark called. My boss called. I let it ring. Silence felt safer. At night I lay in the dark and whispered, where did I fail? The question never left. I replayed everything. If I made more money, I said aloud, would she stay? No one answered. I stared at the ceiling and said, I wasn't enough. Saying it hurt but not saying it hurt more. Days blurred. I skipped work. I ignored emails. One morning my boss left a message. Alex, we need to talk. I deleted it. I already knew. I ran into Lisa outside the cafe. She froze when she saw me. I said, you knew. She sighed. I did. I asked, so tell me. She said, Emily was scared. I snapped, scared of what? Lisa said, of struggling. I laughed bitterly. So she chose comfort. Lisa nodded. She chose safety. I said, over love. Lisa whispered, yes. That truth hit harder than Emily leaving. She cried about it, Lisa added. I replied, that doesn't help. Lisa handed me an envelope. She wrote this but never sent it. I stared at it. Why give it to me? Lisa said, because you deserve honesty. At home I opened it. Emily wrote, I'm sorry I'm weak. My hand shook. I hate myself for choosing easy, she wrote. I laughed through tears. Then why did you? I asked the paper. The letter ended with, I hope you forgive me. I tore it in half. I don't know how, I said. The next day my boss called again. I answered. He said, you missed deadlines. I said, I know. He said, we have to let you go. I replied, okay. He paused. Are you all right? I said, no, and hung up. I sat on the floor. I lost everything, I whispered. Job, love, pride. I hit the wall once. Art. Stupid, I told myself. Mark came by unannounced. You look bad, he said. I replied, I feel worse. He asked, did you eat? I said, does it matter? He sat beside me. It does. I told him, she chose money. Mark said, she chose fear. I said, I chose her. He nodded. And that matters. That night I finally cried. Loud. Broken. I said, I loved her. The room held my voice and gave nothing back. I didn't stop myself. I let it tear through me. Between sobs I said, I wasn't rich. I said, I wasn't enough. I said, I failed. Saying it drained me. When the tears slowed I felt empty. But under that emptiness something stirred. A quiet voice said, you're still here. I laughed weakly. Barely. I lay back and stared at the ceiling again. What now? I asked. No answer came, but the silence felt different. Less cruel. More honest. I thought about the man I was before her. He survived, I said. My chest hurt, but I breathed. I folded the torn letter and put it away. Goodbye, I said softly. It wasn't forgiveness. It was acceptance. Rock bottom wasn't loud. It was quiet. It sounded like unanswered calls in empty rooms. It sounded like me finally hearing myself think. I whispered, this pain is shaping me. I didn't believe it yet, but I needed the hope. I closed my eyes and said, I'm broken. Then I added, but I'm still breathing. That was enough for one night. I sat on the edge of my bed staring at the floor. My phone buzzed. Emily. I stared at it and didn't answer. Another text came. I let it sit. Then I blocked her number. Social media too. Every message, every reminder, I erased them. Mark called. Alex. I didn't pick up. He left a voicemail. Talk to me, man. I didn't. I couldn't. I sold things I didn't need. My guitar, my favorite chair, the coffee maker Emily liked. I packed boxes and dropped them at the thrift store. I told myself, out with the past. Nathan approached me at the temp agency. You look like you need work and a lesson, he said. I laughed bitterly. Both, maybe. He handed me a folder. Start tomorrow. 6 a.m. I asked, what kind of work? He said, anything that keeps you busy. I said, I'll take it. The first day I called Nathan. I don't know if I can do this, I admitted. He said, you don't have a choice. Survival isn't weakness. Strength shows in how you rise. I paused. Even if I'm broken? He said, especially if you're broken. I worked long hours. I lifted boxes, cleaned floors, and did whatever needed doing. I came home exhausted, but I didn't crash emotionally. I was hurting, yes. I still felt the sting of Emily leaving. But I told myself, this pain doesn't control me. One afternoon I texted Mark, I'm alive. He replied instantly, good. Keep it that way. I laughed softly. I realized he was right. I had to choose life over despair. I met Nathan again at the job site. He said, don't chase ghosts. I asked, what if they catch up? He shrugged. Then you stand taller than before. Don't fight them. Move forward. I nodded. His calm made me think maybe I could do it. Late at night I sorted through old photographs. Emily's smile stared back at me from every frame. I picked up one and whispered, I won't be your second choice ever again. I threw it in the trash. The sound of it hitting the bin felt like a promise. Mark visited one evening. You're different, he said. I replied, I had to be. He asked, no desire to call her? I shook my head. It's over. For good. He smiled faintly. Finally. I stayed late at work that night. Lifting boxes, cleaning floors, organizing shelves, I focused on my own strength. My body ached, my mind raced, but my heart started to settle. I wasn't numb, I was determined. I called Nathan. Thanks, I said. He asked, for what? I said, for showing me that survival is more than existing. He replied, now you know it for yourself. I stopped looking for signs from Emily. I stopped asking why she chose him. Instead I asked, who am I becoming? Every night I repeated it like a mantra. I spent hours running long walks, thinking through choices I'd ignored. I am not a second option, I said aloud. I am my own first choice. Saying it made it real. I thought about love differently. Love didn't mean chasing. Love didn't mean begging. Love didn't mean surrendering who I was. I whispered, I can survive without her. I will survive without her. Late one night Mark asked, do you feel better? I laughed softly. Better is not the word. I feel alive. And free. The next morning I woke early. I didn't reach for my phone. I didn't think about her. I only thought about what I could do, what I could achieve. Nathan's words echoed in my head, strength shows in how you rise. I packed a lunch, laced my shoes, and left the apartment. The streets smelled like rain. I felt the ache in my chest but didn't fight it. I accepted it. I will never be someone's second option again, I whispered. I didn't scream, didn't cry. I just walked, one step after another, feeling the ground beneath my feet. I was moving forward. And for the first time in months I smiled, not at her, not at the past, but at myself. I had chosen me. I had chosen life. I had chosen to walk away forever. The mornings became my own again. I set the alarm, brewed coffee, and walked out the door without thinking about her. I told myself, this is for me. Every step to work felt deliberate. Rachel greeted me the first day. Hi, Alex. I'm Rachel, she said, smiling. I nodded. Hi. Nice to meet you. She asked, first day? I shrugged. Not really. She laughed softly. We'll make it work. That was it. No judgment, no questions. Just acceptance. She asked about my tasks. I said, show me what to do. She guided me through everything patiently. You're fast, she said later. I shrugged. I try. She smiled. That's enough. I realized I liked working quietly with someone who didn't pry. One day I spilled a box of files. Rachel laughed lightly. Clumsy today? I muttered, maybe. She said, it happens. Don't let it ruin your day. I nodded, and for the first time in months I didn't feel weak. Lunch breaks were silent. Rachel sometimes asked, want to talk? I said, not really. She nodded. Okay. Her quiet presence was comforting. I didn't explain. I didn't need to. I started reading at night, learning new skills. Excel shortcuts, small coding tricks, anything to sharpen myself. I told myself, build strength quietly. Don't wait for anyone else. Mark texted once. Still alive. I replied, better than before. Rumors reached me. Daniel controlling Emily, cold with the kids. I heard it from casual coworkers, strangers online. I said nothing. I didn't want confirmation. I refused to look back. It doesn't matter, I whispered. And it didn't. Rachel asked about my hobbies one day. I said, I like running. She said, cool. Me too. That was enough. I didn't mention her, Emily, or the past. I didn't need to. My life was my own. I worked late sometimes. Nathan's words echoed, strength shows in how you rise. I thought about how far I'd come. The ache was still there, but it no longer ruled me. I could smile quietly, feel accomplishment without needing anyone to notice. Rachel asked one evening, how's your family? I paused. Complicated, I said. She nodded. We all have that. I said nothing more. I didn't want pity or conversation. I only wanted peace. I realized that I hadn't looked at Emily in months. Not her photos, not messages, nothing. I whispered, I don't need to. And I believed it. My confidence grew slowly, quietly, deep inside. I didn't brag. I didn't announce it. I just felt it. Mark asked, do you miss her? I said, not like before. He tilted his head. Really? I said, I build stability now. Happiness isn't something I chase. He nodded slowly. Good. That's better. I noticed small victories. I finished tasks faster. I helped coworkers. I came home tired but satisfied. I felt awake, alive. I whispered, I am in control. It wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy. It was steady, grounded, unshakable. Rachel smiled at me once and said, you're reliable. I said, thanks. Inside I felt more than thanks. I felt respect for myself. I didn't need her approval. I only needed to keep growing. I started running again at night. Feet pounding the pavement, air cold in my lungs. I repeated quietly, I choose me. I choose my life. I choose stability. Every step, every breath reminded me of my strength. By the time I returned home, I felt lighter. The past whispered occasionally, but I didn't answer. I didn't chase happiness. I didn't look for validation. I built a quiet life of discipline, of skill, of control. Alone in my apartment, I smiled softly. The ache was there, yes, but it no longer defined me. I whispered, I'm alive. I'm whole. And in that silence, I realized I had rebuilt more than a career. I had rebuilt myself. Mark called me one morning. Alex, you won't believe it, he said. I muttered, what now? He laughed softly. Emily's struggling. Daniel's in trouble. I paused. Financial trouble? He said, yeah. His empire isn't what it seemed. I said, interesting. Mark went on. People are talking. His image is cracking. I said, and she's with him? Mark said, still, but it's rough. I nodded. I see. A week later I got a message. From Emily. I stared at it. Can we talk? My fingers hovered over the screen. I typed nothing. I deleted it. I blocked her email too. I whispered, I feel nothing. And I really did. Mark asked, why not answer? I said, because I don't need to. He said, careful. Don't let pride blind you. I laughed. Pride isn't blind. It's awake. Weeks passed. Life stayed steady. Work, running, learning. Rachel smiled sometimes. I smiled back quietly. And then I saw her. On the street, carrying groceries. She looked smaller somehow. Tired eyes, hunched shoulders. She looked fragile. I said, Emily? She looked up. Alex. Her voice was soft, almost pleading. I said, hi. She hesitated. Can we talk? I replied, sure. For a moment. She said, things are harder than I expected. I nodded. I hear that. She asked, Daniel, it's not what it seemed. I said, I can imagine. She said, I made mistakes. I remained silent. She added, I never meant to hurt you this much. I said, I know. She swallowed hard. Do you? Her words faltered. Do you forgive me? I looked at her. I don't hold anger anymore. She looked down. I hoped you'd care. I said, I care about my life now, not the past. Her eyes filled. So you're okay? I said, better than okay. I'm free. She tried to explain more. I miss the life we had. I miss you. I said, I appreciate that, but it's over. She said, even now? I nodded. Especially now. She took a deep breath. I regret leaving you. I said nothing. She waited. I said, regret doesn't bring back what's lost. She nodded slowly. I understand. I noticed the shadows under her eyes. She looked smaller, frail. Life isn't as easy as I thought, she said. I replied, sometimes it teaches you the hard way. She reached out. Alex, I stepped back. No, she blinked. I said, I'm listening but I'm not stopping. I'm not going back. She hesitated. Do you hate me? I shook my head. Hate doesn't help. I just moved on. She whispered, I wish, I said, we all have wishes. She looked at me a long moment. I looked back calm, steady. No anger, no tears. Only distance. Only the quiet knowledge that the balance had shifted. I hope things get better, she said softly. I said, they will. For both of us, eventually. She nodded. Goodbye, Alex. I said, goodbye, Emily. I turned and walked away. Each step felt lighter than the last. Mark called later. Did you see her? I said, I did. She's struggling and I stayed silent. He said, how does that feel? I said, natural. Necessary. Mark said, you didn't need revenge? I laughed softly. No. Karma doesn't knock. It arrives. And I don't have to push it. The next day I ran further than before. Feet pounding the pavement, breath steady. I whispered, I am in control. The past is not mine to fix. I thought about Emily one last time. Not with anger, not with longing. Just observation. Life has consequences. Some lessons are cruel. Some are slow. But they come. I stopped thinking about what she might feel. I stopped imagining her regrets. I only focused on what I could control. My body. My mind. My future. Walking home, I smiled faintly. Not for her. Not for anyone. For me. I had survived betrayal, heartbreak, and the hollow ache of loss. I had grown. And the quiet truth settled in, the power had shifted. I was free. I was steady. I was finally untouched by her choices. I whispered to myself, karma doesn't need me. It works itself out. And I kept walking. The knock on my door startled me. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it. Emily stood there, eyes red, shaky hands. She whispered, Alex? I said, what are you doing here? She took a deep breath. I need to apologize. I crossed my arms. Go ahead. She said, I was wrong. I chose fear. I chose money over love. I nodded slowly. And now? She looked down. Now, I want to try again. If you'll let me. I felt my chest tighten. Old pain surged, memories flashing. I remembered her smiles, her warmth, the life I thought we had. I swallowed. Alex, I whispered to myself. She stepped closer. I know I hurt you. I know I abandoned you. But I've changed. Please, can we start over? I stayed silent, studying her face. Tired, smaller, remorseful. She wiped her tears. I never stopped loving you. Her voice faltered. I was scared. I said, scared of what? She looked down again. Scared of struggle, of uncertainty, of life without control. I replied, and you think love survives that? She whispered, I hope it can. I felt a pull in my chest. Old love, old desire. I wanted to run to her, to beg, to erase the past months. But I stopped myself. I had learned. Pain no longer controlled me. I said calmly, Emily, I loved you. Still do in some ways. She nodded quickly. Then why? She hesitated. I continued, but I won't return to someone who walked away. Someone who chose comfort over us. She blinked, shock crossing her face. I thought maybe you'd forgive me. I said, forgiveness isn't the issue. Protection is. I protect myself now. She sank onto the floor, silent for a moment. Then whispered, I don't want to lose you. I knelt beside her, keeping my distance. You already did, I said gently. Her tears fell freely. I can't believe I lost you, she said. I said nothing. I simply let her cry, no anger, no words to punish, no attempt to console. My strength was in my restraint. She looked at me finally. Do you hate me? I shook my head. Hate doesn't fix the past. It doesn't make anything better. She nodded, trembling. I thought love could survive everything, she said softly. But I see now it can't survive me walking away. I said, exactly. She tried again. Please, can we try just once? I stood up fully. No, Emily. My voice was calm, steady. I will never be someone's second choice again. I will never return to someone who left me when it mattered most. She sobbed, muffled into her hands. I said nothing, just waited until her crying slowed. The room was quiet except for her shallow breaths. Finally, she whispered, I understand. I hope you find happiness. I nodded once. I have. Alone but whole. She looked at me, searching for more. I said, I don't want to hurt you. I don't want revenge. This isn't punishment. It's just me protecting myself. Her lips trembled. You're stronger than I imagined, she whispered. I said, I had to be. She stood slowly. Goodbye, Alex. I opened the door wider. Goodbye, Emily. She left. The hallway was empty. I closed the door. Silence felt different now, clean, firm, final. I sat down and exhaled. No rage. No tears. Just relief. A deep, steady knowing that the past could reach for me, but it no longer held power. I whispered, I choose me. I always will. My chest felt lighter. My mind was clear. The moment tested me, yes. The past tried one last time. But I didn't give in. I didn't chase, beg, or fight. I won simply by standing firm. And in that quiet room I realized, strength wasn't loud. Strength was calm, deliberate, unshakable. I had survived. I had grown. I leaned back, letting the silence settle. My heart still carried memory, but it was mine to hold. Not hers. For the first time in a long time I smiled, steady, unafraid, free. I sat on the balcony, coffee in hand, watching the city wake. The air smelled crisp, fresh. I whispered, I've changed. It wasn't boastful, it was true. Mark called later. Hey, you sound different. I chuckled. Maybe I am. He said, you sound lighter. I said, I guess I am. Rachel stopped by the office. Hey, Alex. Lunch. I nodded. Sure. We walked quietly, side by side. Conversation was easy, natural. She asked, how's life? I said, better. Steady. She smiled. Good. I noticed the small things. How she laughed when she messed up a spreadsheet. How she noticed details others missed. I said, you're good at this. She shrugged, I just pay attention. I said, I like that. Mark texted later, still keeping sane? I replied, more than sane. Growing. He answered, that's new. I typed back, it's me. I reflected on who I was. I had been broken, desperate, lost. I'd chased what wasn't mine, begged for love that wasn't true. I said aloud, never again. Rachel asked one afternoon, do you ever think about her? I paused. Sometimes, I admitted. But it doesn't hurt anymore. She nodded. That's good. I said, I had to let go. Not of her, but of myself. Mark visited in the evening. He looked around my apartment. You're organized now, he said. I laughed. I needed order. He said, and peace? I nodded. Peace, yes. And purpose. I realized I hadn't thought of Emily in weeks. Not her face, not her voice. The past no longer owned me. I whispered, I am not defined by betrayal. Rachel stopped by again. She said, Alex, you've changed. I smiled faintly. I had to. Life doesn't wait. She laughed softly. I like who you are now. I said, thanks. I like it too. I thought about love differently now. Love should never cost respect. Love should lift, not break. I said to Mark later, I understand that now. Finally. He asked, so, are you open again? I said slowly, yes, but carefully. I won't repeat mistakes. I'll let things grow naturally. He nodded. Wise. I smiled. Rachel became part of my life quietly. Lunches, small talks, laughter that felt easy. I didn't rush. I didn't force feelings. I let it happen. I said, I want connection, not need. At work, I noticed my confidence. People listened when I spoke. Not because I demanded it, but because I carried myself with quiet strength. I whispered, this is me. Mark asked one night, do you miss the old Alex? I shook my head. No. He was broken. I've rebuilt. He said, proud of you. I said softly, thank you. I ran at dawn. Feet hitting the pavement, lungs full of air. I repeated quietly, I am stronger. I am whole. I am enough. The mantra didn't feel forced, it felt earned. Rachel texted later, want to walk tonight? I replied, I'd like that. Not longing. Not desperation. Calm, steady choice. I smiled. Mark called before dinner. How's the new you? I said, better. Free. Clear. He laughed. Finally. I said, it feels real. I realized I no longer carried resentment. The ache of betrayal had faded. I allowed myself to feel hope again. I whispered, I can trust life and maybe love again. Evening came. Rachel and I walked side by side. I said, I like who I'm becoming. She smiled. I can see it. I said, it feels good. Strong, steady. Mark texted again, keep this up. I replied, I will. I'm building me. I thought about the past one last time. Not with anger, not with longing. Simply observation. Lessons learned. Strength gained. I whispered softly, I am someone new. And I like him. For the first time, I felt completely in control. Oh, free. The betrayal, the pain, it no longer defined me. I was my own story now. I stood at the edge of the park, hands in my pockets, watching the sunset. Orange and pink streaked the sky, calm, steady. I whispered, this is the end. Not of life, just of her place in it. Mark called earlier. You okay? I said, better than okay. I'm ready. He asked, ready for what? I smiled faintly. To walk away. Forever. I thought of Emily one last time. Her laugh, her smile, her fragile apologies. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel longing. I felt clarity. She chose safety over love, I whispered. I can't change that. I remembered every night I cried alone. Every message I ignored, every empty craving for what she left behind. I said softly, that was my past. Not my future. I thought about Daniel, about her kids, about the life she returned to. I didn't want it. I didn't need it. I choose me, I said aloud, feeling the words settle. Rachel had texted earlier, coffee tomorrow? I smiled. Yes, I'd like that. Not because I needed comfort. Not because I needed love. Simply because life goes on. Connection without need. Strength without desperation. Mark came over later. How does it feel? I said, free. Calm. Solid. He nodded. Finally. I said softly, I didn't run. I didn't hide. I just walked away. I walked down the quiet streets, cool air brushing my face. Each step deliberate. Step mine. I didn't look back. I didn't glance at her apartment, didn't check for her shadow in the cafe. I only walked. A memory hit. Emily reaching for me, asking for another chance. I whispered, no. Not now. Not ever. That old ache tried to stir, but I held it down. I let it exist, but it didn't control me. I passed the river, lights reflecting on the water. I whispered again, I am enough. I am whole. I am free. My chest felt lighter than months of grief, lighter than years of longing. I finally breathed. I thought about the choices I made. Not chasing her, not begging, not holding anger. I said, that is my victory. My peace. Mark had warned me, don't mistake silence for weakness. I had learned silence can be strength. Rachel's laugh echoed in my memory. Not hers, not anyone's. My own. I chuckled softly. I can feel joy again, I whispered. Not loud, not forced, just real. The night deepened. I stopped near a bridge, leaning slightly, hands in pockets. The wind teased my hair. I whispered, pain shaped me but it didn't break me. I am stronger than I thought. I saw a couple holding hands across the street. I felt no envy. I felt only understanding. Some people choose comfort, I said softly. I choose myself. I thought of Mark, of Rachel, of my own hard-won stability. I whispered, I am building my life. Not their life. Not hers. Mine. A text came through from Rachel. See you tomorrow? I smiled faintly, typing, see you? Not needing her, not chasing her. Just welcoming connection that matched my pace, my strength. I turned away from the lights of the city toward the quiet streets. No past. No fear. No shadow clinging. Just me. Just steps forward. I whispered one last time, I walked away. Forever. And I meant it. No running. No hiding. Just done. The night wrapped around me. Cool, steady, real. My chest rose and fell with calm certainty. I was alive. I was free. I was complete. I walked on step by step, knowing the future was mine, untouched by her choices. I carried memory but not pain, lessons but not bitterness. I carried myself. And in that quiet, powerful moment, I finally smiled fully, deeply, unafraid. I had walked away forever, and I was stronger for it.